if you're in your 30s and you want to have kids, but you're not quite there yet, I know you feel that ticking clock, right? Right there in your ovaries, ticking away every year, making you feel like you are just running out of time. Am I right? Especially if you're over 35. I know you feel this, with every doctor's appointment and things. There's so much information out there now that about fertility. We have a friend that struggled to get pregnant and we know it's a concern, but all we're left with is fear and not any empowerment around this conversation until now. This episode is for you, and we're going to talk all about what we can do to support our ovarian health, slow down ovarian aging, and potentially buy you some more time to have babies and have really healthy, thriving babies, and to also just support your health through all of those phases, pregnancy, postpartum, motherhood, in those newborn years, as well as your experience through perimenopause and menopause. It's absolutely possible. So first, I want to start off with, what is ovarian aging? What are we talking about when we're talking about this? Well, to start, we have a chronologic age, which is the age we're usually familiar with. We have a birthday, and every year we count that we are that many years older. Then we have a biologic age. Our biologic age is actually what our cells are experiencing, the aging process that's happening on those, because that can be more rapid or slower than our actual age. Then, to take it one step further, we have an ovarian age, which is actually the aging process on our ovaries, which can be different than our chronologic age and our overall biologic age. And why do we care about this? Well, the factors in our life, environmental factors, the way our lifestyle is, our diet, those things impact the aging process. And we definitely do not want that process to be going faster than our age, because that would give us even less time to have kids, would speed things up. Also, it can come with a lot of other things like inflammation and cellular damage, and make us feel, tired and have migraines and all sorts of things that can come up with it if our cells are not functioning the way that they should be. So, of course, we want to slow that process down whenever we can and really support the optimal health of all of our body, but especially our ovarian tissue, which are producing these hormones that keep us vital, impact literally every area of our body, including our brain, our bones, our skin, and so much more. So we can really take some power back here and change this process that's happening. Now, until now, the largest way that we had to test ovarian aging was basically looking at, quote unquote, how many eggs we have left. I always do this with really big, obvious air quotes. If you're just listening, know that I am actually doing it in person too. And the reason I do that is because it isn't actually the whole story. It isn't just that we're running out of eggs and then we're done, the time is done. It's really a more dynamic process than that really does depend on our ovarian health. But up until this point, again, this was the biggest marker that we had of knowing where someone was in their reproductive, span, as well as the best predictor that we had to sort of know, are you getting close to menopause before you're actually in the process? There are really no other markers that were giving us that information. One of the most popular markers here is AMH, or anti-Mullerian hormone, which is basically a hormone that keeps too many follicles from becoming, the dominant egg that then ovulates. We don't want to be ovulating like 10 eggs at a time. That would be madness. So that's the hormone that keeps that in check. And basically, as we start to have less number of the primordial eggs that could be developing, then that number goes down. And again, that can be a marker to see where we are in this process. How sort of predict how many years we have left to have babies. Again, there's nuance there. There are other ones, other things like an ultrasound with antral follicle count that can also give us some information here. But again, this is sort of outdated information at this point where we're thinking, okay, just how many eggs do we have left and where are we in the process? Now we know that, again, our ovarian tissues largely impact this process of, how quickly these eggs are dying off. Ovulation is one of those factors, but also the health of our tissues can really impact that. We now know that stress impacts this. Our ovaries have literally a nervous system connection. And so our stress and our perception of safety even can even impact the health of these potential eggs. So anyway, long story short, now we have this viewpoint that it isn't just the egg conversation. We have a larger conversation about that. We also have new testing to really have a better predictor of what your ovarian aging process is looking like, and when you may go into menopause. There's a new test that you may have heard me talking about already called Menotime, which is a new test that just came out this year in 2026. That is an AI or machine learning test that inputs some of your own blood tests, including AMH, estradiol, and FSH, as well as a survey of your lifestyle, things like stress, your hormonal symptoms, things like that, and then is able to give you your ovarian age as well as time to menopause and shows a slope of where you are in this process, which can change. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But basically, this is something that we can then use as information to then potentially make some changes to slow down that process if we feel like the process is happening faster than it should be or that we want it to be. So again, we have so much more information, and this picture is more complex, but in a very good way, in my opinion, because it gives us so much more ability to make change. Now, one of the things that comes up when we're talking about our time to menopause and things like that is family history and genetics. So, we might think, well, my mom went into menopause at 42. So, am I going to go into menopause at 42 also? Well, genetics plays a role. It's only about 50% of the story, though. So, if your mom went into early menopause, for example, if you had women in your family who had a great experience through menopause or a terrible experience through menopause, yes, it gives us some information, but it is only some of the information. It is not the whole story. And our nutrition, our lifestyle factors, our environmental exposures, basically what our body and our cells have been throughout our lifetime, absolutely have an impact here. And this is where it becomes very empowering, in my opinion, because again, we can make those changes, we can address those things. And even if it's something that happened in the past, in terms of exposure or something like that, there are still things that we could potentially do to turn that around. Now, I'm not talking about avoiding menopause altogether. That is not possible at this point. And, it is a natural transition that happens. And I think there's a lot of power and freedom that comes with going through menopause too. So that's not what I'm suggesting. But what I am suggesting is changing our experience through perimenopause and menopause. Knowing that just because someone else had a really hard time going through it doesn't mean that we're going to have a really hard time going through it. And we can absolutely change this experience and also, potentially push it out a little bit, at least if it is a more rapid process. Again, if we're having more rapid aging, pushing that off to a more normal time frame and really lowering our risk factors of things like, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, increased risk of osteoporosis, dementia, things like that come up with menopause and especially with premature menopause. So that is my goal when I'm talking about this, talking with patients about this, that we're just trying to slow down aging if it is more rapid than it could or should be. So I hope that makes sense and feels like the right fit. And I think especially when we're talking about our fertility journey and our fertility span, that is the healthy, vital years that we have to be able to have healthy babies, like especially if you're in your 30s and you've been working on your career and you're finding that partner and you haven't done that yet, we want as much time as we can get, right? To have, not only be able to get pregnant, but have it be a really successful, healthy pregnancy, because that is really the ultimate goal, in my opinion. Also, I love to add here that you can also impact the health of your babies and the future generations. We've heard of this like generational impact of our genetics and our epigenetics. It is 100% true. Our health, the way that we take care of ourselves now, will impact the health of our future generations, just like your health was impacted by even your mom and grandmother's health. For one, I mean, even when you were pregnant or when your mom was pregnant with you, the things she was doing in her body affected you, right? But also think about that you actually came from an egg that was in your mom when she was in your grandma. Crazy, right? I love this, like mind blowing. But think about even just that factor. And then beyond that, again, these epigenetic factors that change generationally with our overall health and well-being. Again, this should hopefully feel empowering that you then have this power to positively impact not only your health, but the health of your future generations. And you can really, flip the script. Even if you have, genetic family history that is maybe concerning, you still have power to turn that around to some degree. So I love it. I think this is such an incredible opportunity in this time frame to be able to make these changes for that reason also. How much time can we really buy? Again, I'm not saying that you can just be having babies naturally into like your 50s or 60s. Probably not likely at this point, but being able to have a normal time frame into your later 30s, I think is very reasonable to expect. And especially if the aging that is happening in your body is going faster, we can absolutely push that off to a more normal place. So it does depend on where we are in that, the state of our health, of how much time we might be able to buy and what things we really need to do to change those things. But we'll talk about the levers that we can pull. And on one hand, the things that impact our ovarian aging and can negatively impact it, make it go faster. But then on the flip side of that, what can we then do to slow down that process and, again, be able to potentially buy some more time? So the main things that are causing aging on our ovaries, and again, our overall cells as well, one of the big things are metabolic health and blood sugar. This is something that I feel like is talked about more often now, but still not talked about enough. Because I feel like for so many of us, we're like, I don't know, my hemoglobin A1C is fine. I'm not diabetic. This isn't an issue for me. But still, if you're on a blood sugar roller coaster where, say, you're waking up, drinking coffee, not eating breakfast, you're really stressed out. So your cortisol is spiking. That can mess with your blood sugar and spike your blood sugar, can drop your blood sugar. And then you're starving all of a sudden and you're eating a big meal that has a lot of carbs because that's what you're craving. And then that spikes your blood sugar and then you're crashing mid-afternoon and maybe, reaching for more coffee, more sugar. Those things are signs that you are on a blood sugar roller coaster. If you're getting, you're starving, hangry between meals, you're getting shaky even between meals or feeling unwell, that could be signs of your blood sugar crashing. And we don't want that. Our insulin levels, our insulin, that's the hormone that helps control our blood sugar. And our insulin, if it is going up and down, even if our blood sugar is staying in a relatively normal place, even if we're not diabetic, if our insulin is spiking up and down, going crazy, then that can absolutely impact your metabolic health and signal to your ovaries that we're having some problems. Our ovaries are really sensitive tissues because, as you can imagine, our bodies are smart. And as we evolved, we kind of have this safety mechanism in place where if life is too stressful, if there is starvation, if we're running away from the tiger, then that is not an ideal time to reproduce. And so our bodies learned over time that, hey, this is, let's cut this off if we're in survival mode. Because also, having babies is not an ideal or a necessary thing to do when we're just trying to survive. So our ovarian tissue is very sensitive to stress for this reason. And if we're stressed out and blood sugar is one of those, things that triggers stress in our body, then our ovaries can kind of go into shutdown mode a little bit and we can stop ovulating. We can have irregular ovulation. We can have less progesterone production. Things can start going haywire when our blood sugar is going crazy. It can also negatively impact egg quality because of this. Because again, we're in survival mode. Our resources are not being applied to this, unnecessary thing, our fertility. And we're not going to get all the resources we need to really create really healthy eggs. So again, on the flip side of this, and I'll just kind of go back and forth, so it's really applicable. The things that we can do then are to support stable blood sugar. So, hey, let's eat breakfast in the morning with protein. I usually recommend, eating within an hour of waking with at least 30 grams of protein. It's a great rule of thumb to give your body the nourishment right away that no matter what comes in your day, your body's like, cool, I started with nourishment. I've got the resources that I need. That's a great signal. Maybe not having coffee first thing. I'm not against people having coffee in the morning. I feel like on the internet, there's this big conversation around don't have coffee on an empty stomach. Some people can get away with that. But again, if you're stressed, if you're, busy running out the door to work, then just having coffee, which is going to, kind of stimulate and stress your body a little bit more, not a good idea. So maybe having that a little bit later in the morning, if you're going to have that, have it with food can just change the way that your body is, again, perceiving that food as information, and it sets you up for a better day. Then eating steady meals, 3 meals a day, it's boring, but it works for a reason. Having that lunch, having a good protein-filled lunch, getting that fiber, color of plants, maybe being mindful about the starchy carbohydrates, the really refined foods that can spike your blood sugar. And just, again, eating enough, eating nourishing food, plain and simple, is going to keep your blood sugar more steady. That gives your ovaries a great green light to say, hey, we're good. We have steady nourishment coming in. We have all the supplies we need. Go ahead and put resources into creating these beautiful, lovely, healthy eggs. Keep on ovulating on time. We're good. So very important. Now, the other thing, again, another thing that can impact our ovarian aging is stress and nervous system. Just like I was saying, exactly that description of, our safety and survival mode, it's going to cut off, ovulation. It's going to cut off reproduction. And so we don't want that to happen. So keep stress in check, support your nervous system. How many of us are running in survival mode all the time for no reason, right? We're busy, we've got these meetings, we've got these deadlines, and we're like, this is so important. And we take it as, survival. Our body's perceiving it as survival when it really isn't life or death. And so we need to downgrade that, give our body and our nervous system all these signals of, hey, we're safe. One of the biggest ways of doing that is to let our nervous system chill out and not always be pushing and rushing and doing all these things, doing things to tell our body that it's time to just chill, support our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, digest, and reproduce, part of our autonomic nervous system, as opposed to fight, flight, or freeze. So really doing things to support that, which can be as simple as getting out in nature, taking some big, deep breaths, diaphragmatic breaths, not just up in your chest, but really belly breaths. Signal your vagus nerve, which is, the primary nerve of our parasympathetic nervous system. Doing breath work, grounding, even gargling, humming, these things also trigger our vagus nerve. So having some of these things as a part of our daily life can have a really big impact on our body's perception of stress. Even if we still have a busy job, even if we have a lot of, spinning plates in our lives and a lot of, responsibilities, we can still give our body that signal that, hey, it's all good. I have the capacity to deal with this. And this doesn't have to be something that I'm just, pushing through in fight or flight all the time. The next thing is inflammation. So inflammation can absolutely speed up the aging process on our cells. Basically, inflammation is a normal response in our immune system. Think about, you get a cut. You want that to become inflamed, because that is going to bring all these healing immune cells to that area, keep you from getting an infection, heal up the wound. That is, absolutely necessary and purposeful. But Nowadays, we have a lot of insults in our health that cause unnecessary inflammation, chronic, steady, systemic inflammation, where our body is just, you know, overreacting in a sense to an insult. And there's just immune activation going on all the time. And that can then create unnecessary damage on our cells, start causing wear and tear in our tissues, our cells. And this is not ideal, again, especially on the ovaries, which are very sensitive to those kind of inputs. We don't want that. Even things like autoimmune disease, there are certain autoimmune conditions that can even cross-react and attack the ovaries, which is especially not ideal. So we really want to calm down the immune system, make the immune system feel safe, that there isn't a threat. If there is a threat, like an infection, a virus, bacteria, something like that, toxins that our body perceives as a foreign invader that it is trying to get rid of, those things we really want to remove from our body. And then we want to give the right, again, signaling to our body that it is safe, calm down inflammation. One of the biggest things there is our diet. An anti-inflammatory diet you may have heard of. Basically, what that is a whole plant, a whole food-based diet, limiting processed artificial foods and really supporting eating a lot of colorful vegetables, plants in general, getting a lot of variety in our diet, organic, grass-fed, lean meats. These are the things that it signals our body to heal, calm down. The colors in food, in plants in particular, are different antioxidants that go in and fight free radicals, fight damage happening on our cells. And that is essential for what we're talking about here. So important and so powerful to be getting those foods in because they're truly medicine to our body. And limiting, again, the things that cause inflammation in our diet. So again, processed foods, seed oils, excessive amounts of like dairy foods. I'm not across the board opposed to dairy, but it can be really inflammatory. Gluten and wheat, especially processed wheat from the US, can be very inflammatory. Again, not everyone needs to 100% avoid gluten, but these things can be very inflammatory. People can be very reactive to them. They're top of the list when it comes to food reactions. So something to be aware of. Alcohol, of course, is really inflammatory. It's literally a poison to our bodies. So I'm sorry, but there's no way around it, that it's just never going to be a good part of your diet. It's never going to be supportive of your health. So something to consider. And then, of course, smoking, things like that are absolutely an issue when it comes to causing inflammation, damaging our ovaries and our cellular health. I also like to note here, charred foods, candied, caramelized, like foods that have been cooked on high heat, fried. Oh my gosh. These also create AGEs in our body, which are advanced glycation end products, which are so inflammatory. They cause a lot of oxidative stress in our body. Those are really ones to be really mindful too. Again, just say no to fried foods in general, especially if you're really trying to support your health or really limit them. But even eating a lot of charred foods, if you're just always barbecuing, maybe something to watch out for. Even like toasting your toast where it's like very, charred could be a little bit too much if it's just all the time. So something to be aware of, that it can be very simple to then, choose lower heat ways of cooking that can really positively influence your inflammation, your oxidative stress levels. So something to consider there. I also like to mention too, our gut health can have a really big impact on inflammation as well. So if you have leaky gut, which is basically increased intestinal permeability, damage to your gut lining, that can come with medications, it can come with diet, stress, all of these things that we've already talked about so far, then that can also be a really big source of inflammation. So whether or not you have symptoms that go along with your digestion, like having bloating or having, irregular bowel movements, you could still have inflammation there. That is a big driver of systemic inflammation. So if you're on a journey of looking for inflammation, that's really an important place to look. It also is a big driver of autoimmunity. If we have issues in our gut and we're reacting to certain foods, that can be a big trigger for developing autoimmunity because our gut lining is just surrounded by immune cells and immune tissues. So that can be a big issue there too. Our mitochondrial health is a really big part of this conversation too. And if you don't remember, our mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cells, but also they act as sort of, detectors of our environment as well. They're very sensitive to environmental toxins and stressors, and they can become damaged. They can stop, reproducing well and creating new healthy mitochondria when we have some of these things at play. So that's largely, this is one of the big things we're talking about. But then again, on the flip side, and how to support that, supporting our mitochondria are a really big opportunity to improve all these things and slow down the aging process. Also just to help us feel great and energetic and, help things function appropriately. We really want healthy mitochondria. And the foundations of our health are going to be really supportive and important here. So getting enough sleep, getting appropriate movement, not too strenuous, but also not strenuous enough is a great, rule of thumb to just simplify it down. And getting those key nutrients from our food, like I was mentioning, that color, all those antioxidants are going to just nourish your mitochondria. And, trying to avoid those environmental toxins, exposures that are going to damage mitochondria. On the note of toxins, you again may have heard of endocrine disrupting chemicals. Basically, those are chemicals in our environment that particularly impact our hormones. So these are especially ones that we want to watch out for. They're rampant in our environment, in our personal care products, in our scented candles, in our cleaning products in our house. They're everywhere. And it is within our control also to be able to make changes there. So while it sucks that we have to be really on point and, educate ourselves to be able to avoid these things, it can create a huge change with relatively, little resistance, meaning like, yes, you have to find the products and switch out your products. But once you do that, you're good. And you can just be on autopilot again using those cleaner products and knowing that you're not putting extra chemicals into your body every single day. So something to really consider. The big ones that I usually recommend avoiding are parabens and phthalates in our beauty products, especially. So trying to, limit those. You can also go to EWG.org, the Environmental Working Group, and they have a whole database. There are also apps like the Yucca app that you can look at your products, look at the ingredients, and feel empowered in making some different choices. So keep in mind that this is generalized information for the average person. This may be a little bit different for you, depending on, what's going on in your health. But these are some great starting points to, again, try to limit the negative effects that could be coming in from your environment, from your lifestyle, and really give some positive input into your health and be able to slow things down a bit. I'm not going to go into too much detail in terms of supplementation that we can do to support ovarian health, but know that that's another layer on top of the foundational things. The foundations are still honestly going to be the most important things, but there can be some supplementation that helps in addition. I will just mention, a couple of things that can be really huge here, particularly antioxidants. CoQ10 is, the gold standard when it comes to supporting our ovarian health and fertility. So that is one that's tried and true. And then other antioxidants that I really like to use here are things like alpha lipoic acid, QQ. There are things like urolithin A that are a bit newer on the market. And we may not have direct evidence quite yet with ovarian aging, but proof that it can help with aging process in general. So I still like to use them there for this sort of anti-aging protocol. I truly don't like that term anti-aging, but I think if you've been listening so far, you understand what I'm saying. That it's not we're trying not to age, but we're trying to slow down the process and really support our longevity. So with these things, again, my hope would be that, you can look at the big picture of the process that's happening on your body, on your ovaries, and be able to make some really targeted changes in your life to be able to slow this process down a bit. And if it's happening more quickly than it should, if you're already doing things right, then great. But getting the information to really know where you stand can be really helpful here to understand, what you need to do to support that. And then really being able to incorporate this into your lifestyle and not stress about it and feel like you have this laundry list of things you should do, but really be able to create this beautiful lifestyle for yourself that is supportive of your goals. Because, while it is so much harder to live a healthy life nowadays, and it oftentimes comes with extra work, you have to go out of your way to get these products that don't have, chemicals in them. We have to go out of our way to spend more to buy organic and all of that. It's really unfortunate, where the world is right now, especially in the US. But you can still, get your resources, find, okay, here's where I'm going to get my, fresh produce. Here's where I'm going to get my products. These are the brands I like to use. You can create this template for yourself. And again, go on autopilot with it and just have it be part of your life and know that you are doing this for a really important reason. I know it's hard to make these changes when we don't know why we're doing it. We're like, okay, I'm just taking this supplement. I'm just taking, eating this diet, and we can get so burned out on it if we don't stay in alignment with our true why. And for you, again, if your why is that you want to have really healthy babies, you want to have that opportunity to have, not just one kid, but 2 kids, whatever your dream is, then again, creating that lifestyle that's really going to support that and be in alignment with that, I think then makes it so much simpler and honestly easier, because we're like, yep, I'm going to eat my vegetables because I know I'm nourishing my ovaries, and this is going to support my overall health. And I promise you, it is not for nothing. It isn't maybe just that one thing, that one serving of broccoli, for example, that's going to, change your entire health trajectory. But if you keep showing up consistently with these things, it will 100% have a positive impact on your life and your fertility and your hormonal health and your longevity and all of it. And also keep in mind, a note here that when we talk about the foundations, I also like to mention that community, joy, fun are also really important. It isn't all about just doing the work and, everything's so hard and we have to force everything. It's also about just enjoying life right now in this present moment. And that will also positively impact your health too. Community, there are incredible studies to show how important community is on our health. So also keep that in mind. Reach out, make a new friend, find a support group, whatever it needs to be to support you in that aspect of your health, and just go have some fun too. So with that, again, to kind of wrap up, the goal here is really to see if we're having more rapid aging happening ourselves and slow that down so that they can then, buy ourselves some time, achieve our goals of having those healthy babies, and then also ideally long term lower our risks of some of the things like cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, dementia that do go higher with menopause and can go even higher if this process is happening more quickly. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, that I love talking about action steps as well, because I don't want you just listening and getting the information and then, doing nothing about it, forgetting about it. I would love for you to take something away from this that's really going to positively impact your health and well-being. So if you have a moment right now, if you're not driving or something, maybe create a voice note for yourself, write something down, put something in your calendar. Oh, I love putting things in the calendar. That's when they'll actually happen. To even just make one positive change based off of the things that you've heard today. Maybe, plan to eat breakfast tomorrow, plan out what you're going to get, go to the grocery store to get those ingredients, or, schedule yourself for your bedtime wind down routine so you can get to bed sooner and get that 8 hours of sleep. Whatever it's going to be, I implore you to at least write one thing down right now and take action on it so that you can really start to improve your well-being right now. If you have questions about this, please reach out. I love to hear from you. I love to hear what questions you have. If you, have any confusion over some of these topics, please reach out. And also, if you need some support here, if you want to look into your health and really understand if you have some of these drivers of more rapid ovarian aging, if you want to check your ovarian age, then I'd be happy to support you with that. So feel free to reach out. We always have that linked in the show notes below. So you can reach out to us there. You can also find me on Instagram at Dr. Miranda Naylor, and you can just DM me. I'd be happy to start a conversation with you and be able to support you. All right. Enjoy your newfound healthy ovarian aging lifestyle, and I'll see you next week.